All rights reserved. We reserve all rights. Disclaimer.
This is not, I'm not preaching, see? I'm not saying this is what you ought to do. I'm simply pointing out a state of affairs that is
all rights reserved. We reserve all rights. Disclaimer.
This is not, I'm not preaching, see? I'm not saying this is what you ought to do. I'm simply pointing out a state of affairs that is so. There's no moralism in this whatsoever. It's simply pointing out, like, if you put your hand into the fire, you'll get burned. You can get burned if you want to. It's okay. But if it so happens that you don't want to get burned, and you don't put your hand in the fire.
We have been lied to. The COVID-19 vaccine is not a vaccine at all. It is a cellular genetic modification technology, admittedly designed to give those ignorant enough to take it a self-creating autoimmune disease, similar to what used to be called AIDS. The COVID's deep nasal test swabs are not tests at all. They, too, are a multi-purpose nanobiological warfare and transhumanism technology that we will cover in great depth in this film. Lastly, the number of deaths, irreversible adverse reactions, and biological damage already caused by the first round of COVID's jabs are exponentially greater than you have been told, and will go down as the greatest medical fraud and eugenics-driven democide and genocide in recorded history. As we are about to show you, germ theory is a eugenics-driven lie. We have all been duped. Part 1. The Test Swab, Nanobioweapon. Nescience, from the Latin verb nesciere, means to not know because knowledge was absent or unattainable. Really, it means by no fault of your own. Ignorance comes from the Latin verb ignorare. Ignorance does not mean you are stupid. It means to not know, even though necessary information is present, because that information has been willfully refused or disregarded by you. Meaning you have the information highway in that phone in your pocket, and yet you still willingly let someone stick deep and twirl something into your blood-brain barrier without bothering to use that pocket device to research if that action is harmful or beneficial to you. Nescience is not your fault. Ignorance is your fault. So let's start paying attention. This is important information. This rice-sized microchipping propaganda is old-school conspiracy theory rhetoric to throw you off from researching where technology is really at today. We are now in the era of nanodust, nanoparticles, smart dust, and the fusing of technology and human biology, known as synthetic biology. The UK.gov website sums this up like this. The fourth industrial revolution is of a scale, speed, and complexity that is unprecedented. It is characterized by a fusion of technologies such as artificial intelligence, human gene editing, and advanced robotics that is, quote, blurring the line between the physical, digital, and biological worlds, unquote. Hitachi makes a nanochip that is only 1/7 of 1 millimeter squared in size. It has GPS capability, sometimes called smart dust, as they can be sprayed on us, absorbed in the sweat pores of the skin, taken in foods, drinks, injected, and also inserted through the nasal passage with a cotton swab. They have a 2-axis magnetic sensor to track direction. Remember that magnetism. An accelerometer to track speed, light intensity sensor, humidity sensor, pressure sensor, even a temperature sensor, and can transmit wireless to the smart grid Internet of Things and the cloud, literally hooking up its human biological host to the smart grid tracking system, like a walking, breathing smartphone. Johns Hopkins University received $870 million from the Gates Foundation and has developed a version of smart dust called a TheraGripper. There are dozens of them on this swab, inspired by a parasitic worm that digs its sharp teeth into the host's intestines or blood-brain barrier, can latch onto intestinal mucosa and release drugs, poisons, or even smart dust into the human body. Let's get one thing perfectly clear here. The word virus comes from the Latin virus, meaning poison, poisonous fluid, poisonous. We might also call this a foreign toxin or toxic substance. An antigen is a foreign, non-self substance that includes toxins, meaning poisons, bacteria, foreign blood cells, any substance as a toxin or enzyme. In other words, an antigen is a virus, a foreign poison that has no business being in your body's interstitial fluids. What kind of ignorance and ludicrous Dark Ages insanity does it take to believe that injecting 72 foreign antigens, meaning toxins, meaning poisons, meaning viruses, into your body is the best way to protect your body from just one foreign antigen, meaning toxin, meaning poison, meaning virus? Why would your body not be able to handle just one poison unless you poisoned it with that one plus 71 other poisons as well? But I digress. Back to the tests. "11 years ago, 2009, nanoparticles for nasal vaccination. The great interest in mucosal nasal vaccine delivery arises from the fact that mucosal surfaces represent the major site of entry for many pathogens. This is false. It is the exit point for your body to excrete poisons enveloped in mucus safely. That's why you have a runny nose during your winter cold and flu detoxification, meaning seasonal antigen or poison removal cycles of your toxic body. Nasal delivery is especially attractive for inserting poisonous antigens into your body, as the nasal epithelium is characterized by relatively high permeability. The use of nanocarriers provides a suitable way for the nasal delivery of antigenic molecules, meaning a fast way to poison your interstitial fluids directly up your nose. Then we have the DARPA hydrogel biosensor and plantable nanochip that appears to be slated for the upcoming COVID vaccines that the U.S. Department of Defense and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have partnered with Profusa, a Silicon Valley company, to manufacture. But hydrogel nanoparticles and nanocomposites have already been researched for nasal drug or vaccine delivery, not just injectable vaccines. Hydrogel nanosystems have mucoadhesive properties, meaning they stick to your boogers and mucous membranes longer in order to maximize the residence time and hence increase the period of contact with the nasal mucosa and enhance the poison antigen or smart dust absorption into your body. Another study speaks about the development of intranasal, oral, topical, pulmonary, and rectal vaccines, but found the nasal route offers the most promising opportunity for vaccine administration of adjuvants, meaning poisons, mucoadhesives, smart dust particulate delivery systems, virus-like particles, meaning more poisons, getting around vaccine regulatory authorities, and issues for effective antigen or poison retention periods that enables its interaction with the lymphatic system. So the billion-dollar question, are we being tested or vaccinated and nanochipped without consent?
I wanted to show you guys something. I got a couple COVID tests from a friend, and I wanted to break them down and see what was in these COVID tests. What were they really doing in these COVID tests? Do you see the COVID test says chip wrapped with traditional fiber? Well, this fiber that's on here is the same fiber that comes out of my body. These are nanoparticles. I'm going to show you up close. Do you see that silver? That's a silver color. There we go. See how that's silver? There's a regular cotton Q-tip. That one's white. But this swab right here is a legit COVID test. And I broke it down. And these are the same particles that come out of my body. These are nanoparticles. These particles are alive and they move. I just broke it down here. Michael, hold this right here. That's the silver fiber. That's what's the COVID Q-tip. It's shiny, it's silver, and they're alive. You see that, people? Do you see them silver particles? That's all this. That's this. Right here, they don't even want to let go. That's not cotton. This is cotton. This is the COVID. This is a regular Q-tip. See, the regular Q-tip, it's not shiny at all. It's white. Put it next to that. You see the difference in material? One's shiny, one's cotton. This is cotton. And are your nanoparticles. These are all the silver strings. You guys better leave them damn tests alone. That's what you better do. Because they're not doing chipping. Absolutely not. They're putting nanoparticles right into your head. I know this for a fact because this material, these fibers, these silver fibers right here, these come out of my body. They're called Morgellons. If you don't know what Morgellons are, go look at what Morgellons are.
Dr. Casey has taken numerous fiber samples and says they're unlike anything she's ever seen.
They are not textile. They are not any known substance.
Dr. Casey was amazed by the mysterious fiber on Brian's hand and decided to have it tested. She tugs on it, but the fiber holds firm. Finally, it comes loose.
We took the whole plug of skin with it.
Dr. Casey and her colleague, Dr. Randy Wymore, take the samples to Tulsa's crime lab.
Morgellons fibers are not any known textile, cotton or rayon or nylon, not any of those.
What's more, the fibers don't burn when exposed to high heat.
Have you ever done a fiber that didn't vaporize completely other than the Morgellons fiber?
No.
Many in the medical community are nonetheless skeptical, but people who say they have Morgellons are desperate.
These are silver fibers. It's not cotton. This is what the COVID Q-tip test is. You see that one down there alive? They do their own thing. Look, he's trying to grab it. He's mad. See him? This is what they put in the head. This is their COVID test. They're putting this shit right in the brain. Close to the brain. He's mad. Look. See him? He's getting mad. So you guys think I'm lying? I'm showing you live. Look at him getting mad.
He ain't even breathing on it. It's fucking moving.
Oh, he got mad. You see him, Micah?
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit, they really are alive. Look at how they're fighting each
Look
other.
at this one. Look.
Oh, they got a link. Now let me see if I can impose them. This is the COVID test. Oh, hell
It just wrapped around that other one.
wild. This is so wild, y'all. I can't believe y'all let these people put these Q-tips in your guys' head.
taken this step, which is seen by many around the president, including people who are closest to him, as pretty definitive about him. Hearing Vice President Vice President Mike Pence at the White House today. You are reporting on the White House team that President Trump is leaning harder on Pence to put the election results.
I'm going to come over here to the regular cotton.
Nothing. There's proof.
Regular cotton don't do a damn thing. It's not fighting. It's not moving. I'm putting it by. It's not doing absolutely nothing. 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 But these jokers right here.
He pleases his boss and not getting on Trump's wrong side, but also trying to keep his own reputation intact while
Look at the bubbles, son.
future political
See, that one rose up to my finger, watch.
president in 2024.
They get mad. The same shit. This is nanoparticles, more jillions. This is the COVID test. This is what the COVID test is. But you're still trying to come after me. You don't get on somewhere.
Whether alive or nanomachines and nanosmart dust with magnetic properties, cotton swabs are not magnetically attracted to each other. On a COVAIDS thread, we find this alarming claim by someone whose name I have redacted, alleging, went to do a COVID test and they handed me the swab and I took off with it. When I got home and examined it, I found this holographic optical chip on the end of the swab. I ran a Pixie scan on it, and sure enough, I detected TC, technetium, element 43, a radioactive transition metal with bioinfiltrator properties, including mind control and DNA direct manipulation. Holy f... This is the holographic optical chip he claims to have found. Then, a conversation ensues between people with real names I've redacted, claiming, wow, just as I suspected, found in a swab test kit. It is a pyrophosphate ion with TC99M, which adheres to calcium deposits. Calcium is known to be liquefied in 5G frequencies. Isotopes of technetium-99M, it binds chemically to many biologically active molecules. These properties make it suitable for many medical radioactive isotope reactions. When TC99M is combined with a tin compound, it binds to red blood cells and can therefore be used to map circulatory system disorders. And then there is a link to microscopic nanotechnology polymer fibers.
Do you believe that this mRNA vaccine is going to genetically modify?
Yes, it will. The mRNA will actually take a piece of your DNA out. It will replace it with a synthetic one and a synthetic piece. And they can do it anywhere they want in your whole DNA mechanism. So, you know, who knows what they're going to modify about you. But that also makes you patentable.
That's right.
They can own you. And let me tell you, they've already started the vaccinations. They've already started them. They started them a long time ago because the test vaccinates you. So I have the article right here in front of me, and here's what it says. Yes, they can vaccinate us through the nasal test swabs and target the brain. Now, here's the thing. As a doctor, I said, this is crazy because, you see, you're wearing a mask to cover your, now they would hate it. They would not allow you into a store if you just wear a mask over your nose. You got to wear it over your mouth because supposedly the COVID-19 is in your saliva. Well, if it's in your saliva, then all they have to do is swab the inside of your mouth like they do for a DNA test. But no, they take these long Q-tips and they stick them all the way back, almost into your brain. They stick them back to the back of the nasal sinuses and then they twist them. All right, here's what they're doing. First of all, there is a very thin plate of bone that covers the brain between the brain and the nasal sinus, and it's called the cribriform plate. And every doctor knows about the cribriform plate. All right. Now, the cribriform plate has some openings in it where olfactory nerves from the nose, go through that plate into the brain, and bone, this kind of bone in the cribriform plate is porous anyway. So substances can go through it. So when they take that swab and they put it back there and twist it, what they're doing is depositing things back there. This, you can't see this, but this shows that they have nanoparticles that are actually on the ends of the Q-tips that they're putting in there that can get into your brain. They can be hooked up to the cloud. So they are already vaccinating you with the test. With the test. This is the beginning. So when you go to get tested, you are actually being vaccinated and implanted with nanoparticles.
But what does our surgeon, Dr. Day, mean by hooked up to the cloud? Many different transhumanism patents had already been filed years before the COVID pandemic was ever heard of, for governments, banks, and corporations to hook their humans and animals up directly to the Internet of Things through the upcoming 5G and 6G smart grids and smart cities in order to track, monitor, and control all resources on the planet. The 2012 and 2015 AT&T U.S. Patent 101-630-55B2 was for routing policies for biological hosts, products to provide interfaces between intra-host networks and inter-host nanosmart dust networks within biological hosts, utilizing neuroregional translations performed to route communications to and from the biological hosts. AT&T U.S. Patent 201-301-42363 was for devices and methods for transferring data through a human body using short-range 5G millimeter wave communications through Bluetooth and other devices by transferring data signals through the bones and skin of a human user by placing a piezoelectric transducer microphone on or inside the body that could even occur through two human bodies making physical contact. We also have the now infamous Microsoft patent US 1613818 from March 2020 and its world patent W02020-060606-666 for a digital cryptocurrency system using body activity data. Human body activity associated with a task provided to a user may be used in a mining process of a cryptocurrency system. A server may provide a task to a device of a user which is communicatively coupled to a server. A sensor coupled to or compromised in the device of the user may sense your body activity of the user. Body activity data may be generated based on the sensed body activity of the user. The cryptocurrency system communicatively coupled to the device of the user may verify if the body activity data satisfies one or more conditions set by the cryptocurrency system and award cryptocurrency to the user whose body activity data is verified. In other words, in the coming cashless society, if you want to get paid your digital crypto slave wages, you'll have to do whatever task you're told to do, and this device will spy on your body to make sure you've actually done it. But how will this sensor hooked up to the user's device possibly know what your physical body has or hasn't done? If you've been paying attention at all to this film, you've already figured this out. It will communicate directly with the nanosmart dust chips that have already been inserted into your brain and body through the deep nasal COVAD's test swab. It is of no coincidence that Bill Gates and Microsoft hold this patent, as back in 2016, before stepping down from Microsoft to distance himself from this, Bill Gates, Microsoft, and Gavi teamed up to create the ID 2020 project, which is headed by Kim Gagne, a strategic communications advisor with experience in the worlds of government relations, diplomacy, and law, who served as an executive director of the European Cloud Alliance, a business coalition focused on policy issues related to cloud computing. As Dr. Day said, Kim Gagne comes from Microsoft corporate senior policy and management positions in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, and was a foreign service officer with the U.S. Department of State, or as Benito Mussolini said, fascism is the merger of corporate and government power. ID 2020's goal is based on the United Nations member states' adopted Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, including their commitment to provide legal digital identity for all people on Earth, including birth registration by 2030. One of their 4 core requirements of the digital ID looks remarkably like the COVID virus and is a biological microchipping system so persistent it lives with you from life to death, meaning if you took that swab up the nose, it's for life. In ID 2020's Emerging Technologies section, we find that new technologies, including blockchain, when used in conjunction with long-proven technologies such as biometrics, now make it possible for all people to have access to a safe, verifiable, and persistent form of identity. This is all, of course, doublespeak rhetoric, meaning the governments will now have digital surveillance access to all human beings that are nanochipped like livestock. For the new surveillance capital industry, the behavioral futures markets being set up by billionaires and corporations, as well as the behavioral surplus industry and human biometric energy transfer technology for crypto data mining, powered by those people ignorant enough to take the test swab, vaccine injection, and luciferase hydrogel tattoo for their vaccine passport. Imagine this scenario. The government all-seeing AI tells you to go to a specific location and dig a ditch all day, and you will get paid whatever non-negotiable amount of digital cryptocurrency credits that they choose into your account. If you don't do it because you don't want to be a ditch digger, the NanoSmart dust sensors inside of your body, broadcasting your every location, movement, and biometrics back to the government AI through the wireless 5G sensor interfaces will give you away. Your social credit score will be lowered to restrict all allowed activities and travel possibilities, and you will receive no digital currency credit in your account as punishment for failing to complete the task you are dictated. As Klaus Schwab put it, you will own nothing and you'll be happy about it. As George Orwell put it, if you want the vision of the future, imagine a boot stomping on a human face forever. Good Family Fun, a 20 research by scientists shows that when cellular barriers are exposed to metal nanoparticles, cellular messengers are released that may cause damage to the DNA of developing brain cells, meaning brain damage, during their interactions with cell membranes and the internalization into cells, altering key signaling pathways and processes. Which brings us to Part 2, the mRNA vaccine, anaphylaxis, and AIDS.
Rocco, let's make sure we're clear on something. Let's stipulate that this is not a vaccine. I mean, we need to be really clear. We're using the term vaccine to sneak this thing under public health exemptions. This is not a vaccine. This is a mRNA packaged in a fat envelope that is delivered to a cell. It is a medical device designed to stimulate the human cell into becoming a pathogen creator. It is not a vaccine. Vaccines actually are a legally defined term, and they're a legally defined term under public health law. They're a legally defined term under CDC and FDA standards, and a vaccine specifically has to stimulate both an immunity within the person receiving it, but it also has to disrupt transmission. And that is not what this is. They have been abundantly clear in saying that the mRNA strand that is going into the cell is not to stop transmission. It is a treatment. But if it was discussed as a treatment, it would not get the sympathetic ear of public health authorities, because then people would say, well, what other treatments are there? The use of the term vaccine is unconscionable for both the legal definition term of it, but also because it actually is the sucker punch to open and free discourse. Because by saying vaccine, you dump it into a thing where you could be anti or pro the therapy. But if you actually talked about it as a therapy, remember, and people forget this, Moderna was started as a chemotherapy company for cancer, not a vaccine manufacturer for SARS. If we said we're going to give people prophylactic chemotherapy for the cancer they don't have, you'd be laughed out of a room because it's a stupid idea. That's exactly what this is. This is a mechanical device in the form of a very small packet of technology that is being inserted into the human system to activate the cell to become a pathogen manufacturing site. And I refuse to stipulate in any conversations that this is in fact a vaccine issue. The only reason why the term is being used is to abuse the 1905 Jacobson case that has been misrepresented since it was written. And if we were honest with this, we would actually call it what it is. It is a chemical pathogen device that is actually meant to unleash a chemical pathogen production action within a cell. It is a medical device, not a drug, because it meets the CDRH definition of a device. It is not a living system. It is not a biologic system. It is a physical technology. It happens to just come in the size of a molecular package. So we need to be really clear on making sure we don't fall for their game, because their game is, if we talk about it as a vaccine, then we're going to get into a vaccine conversation. But this is not, by their own admission, a vaccine.
So, Katie, as a
result, it must be clear to everyone listening that we will not fall for this failed definition, just like we won't fall for their industrial chemical definition of health, because both of them are functionally flawed and are an explicit violation of the legal construct that is being exploited.
So what should I be referring to it as? A chemical agent, or?
Correct. It's a synthetic pathogen. They've literally injected the very pathogenic part of the virus into every cell of the body.
When you say pathogen, that says to me it's going to make me sick.
Correct. So
it is made to make you sick, Rocco. Rocco, remember that 80% of the people allegedly exposed to allegedly SARS-CoV-2, so let's not get into that rabbit hole, but 80% of the people who are exposed to allegedly the virus have no symptoms at all. They're called asymptomatic carriers. 80% of the people who get this injected into them have a clinical adverse event.
Correct.
Right.
You are getting injected with a chemical substance to induce illness, not to induce a immunotransmissive response. In other words, nothing about this is going to stop you from transmitting anything. This is about getting you sick and having your own cells be the thing that get you sick.
Correct.
So it's gonna trigger an autoimmune response?
It can, and it can.
Among many things.
Among many things. It can actually directly cause multiple sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, Alzheimer's disease, because that's what the expression of that pathogenic envelope. It can cause accelerated cancer.
What Dr. Martin, Dr. Mikovits, and Dr. Andrew Wakefield are pointing out, an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine is not a vaccine at all. It doesn't elicit an immune response. It has to be turned into a foreign protein or antigen, meaning poison. And it's this poisonous foreign protein, in turn, that creates your natural immune response. A messenger RNA quote-unquote vaccine is actually genetic engineering. You'll have your own genetically reprogrammed cells in your own body that will produce poisonous proteins to which your immune system will mount an immune response against. That's called an autoimmune disease, which used to be called AIDS. The potential for this to go horribly wrong is enormous. At the end of this film, we'll show you the alarmingly high cases of death, paralysis, tachycardia, pruritus, delirium, hyperpyrexia, and anaphylactic shock from these new mRNA injections that are being hidden from you by the media. But why is this happening to people? Our bodies have a biological intelligence that considers any foreign non-self protein, meaning antigen, meaning poison, that is not made by our own cells to perform a function needed by our body as a toxic foreign intruder, and is designed to destroy and remove that poisonous protein antigen. Our DNA has 4 nitrogenous nucleic acid bases, meaning made of nitrogen or nitrogen-like, that combine in varying combination sequences of these bases to code for the creation of specific proteins our bodies need to make. Our mRNA, or messenger RNA, is the go-between instructional codes that tell the ribosomes in our cells how to link different amino acids together to form a specific needed protein by the body. What these new, untested Frankenstein human genetic modification injections are actually doing is inserting a new messenger RNA coding sequence into your body's cells that instructs your ribosomes to create a foreign microbial protein, meaning antigen, meaning poison, that has no business being inside your body. So your body will go into anaphylactic shock and attack it. If you are wondering why people are dropping dead or getting severely sick, go pet an angry rattlesnake or king cobra and see how your body reacts after venomous foreign protein antigens enter into your bloodstream. Only now, your own cells are programmed to constantly inject venom into your interstitial fluids.
And that's how people get the only way people can get swine flu is if they've taken the pig tissue, grown it in a solvent toxic environment, and then these swine cells create a virus to break itself down.
Okay. Now let's.
Okay. You can inject it into a human, and then you will find those actual swine tissue in there. It's just you have a waste product, and now the body has to clean that waste product out of the body, and it's going to be very alarmed because you've got foreign tissue in there injected into the body. That's why Guillain-Barré disease, that's why anaphylactic shock occurs when you inject people with foreign debris, foreign tissue. It goes into shock. It can even die from the shock of foreign tissue being injected into you.
The COVAIDS mRNA vaccine is designed to give you an autoimmune disease, which is caused due to different alterations in the immune system, which are triggered by the exposure to various exogenous and endogenous antigens or poisons. Exogenous means poisons from outside of your body, like an injection. Endogenous means poisons created inside of your body, as this injection programs your own cells to create. They are admittedly and literally giving you AIDS. It is a false debunked logical fallacy that there was a difference between an autoimmune disease and AIDS because you caught the fictional AIDS virus exogenously from shagging a monkey and then sexually transmitting it to another human. Nobody shags monkeys, and AIDS is not contagious. You and even your babies were injected with the AIDS antigen. You didn't catch it. In fact, hundreds of normal medical conditions trigger a false positive AIDS test, which is just a poisonous antigen detection test. You may think you have it, but you don't.
Makes perfect sense. Now, you say that AIDS was created in a laboratory.
Yes, in UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, 1961 and 62. They created a mixture. What they did was combine the waste product, the virus of a bovine, the lymphonomic virus of a sheep, and the leukemic virus of a bovine. The way you can only get a virus, like I said, is if the tissue is so toxic with chemicals that bacteria can't do their normal janitorial work and eat the organic tissue and then reduce the waste and eliminate little waste. When your body makes a solvent, the way that which is a virus, a solvent is a virus, it's a soap, it's not alive. There's no nucleus, no respiratory system, no digestive tract, no circulatory system. There's none of that. So it's not alive. It's a waste product.
Right.
It's dissolved animal tissue.
Right.
Okay.
But now,
and specific animal tissue. So what they do is they take animal tissue and put it in a petri dish in a contaminated environment, but with enough solution to keep them alive. So the cells start taking themselves apart with solvents. And will eventually kill the cell. This virus will kill the cell. It'll kill itself by poisoning itself and taking itself apart.
I want to ask you to elaborate more about the AIDS virus. So the AIDS virus is created in a lab at UCLA. For what purpose would they create something like that? They were trying to create, according to the records that I got to see, and they were discovered by a Dr. Robert Strecker. I'm a nutritional doctor, got my PhD in nutrition. Dr. Strecker has like 4 doctorates, and one is in biochemistry and virology. Right.
Now, the only way that you can make a virus is to put it in a petri dish with the animal tissue. Okay, the only way that animal tissue can ever get into a human is if it is injected or another animal. Right. So what they did was they incubated these 2 diseases from both a sheep and a cow, the leukemic virus of a cow, the bovine, and the lymphonomic virus of the sheep. They put those 2 together and created a new kind of deadly biological warfare disease.
So
now, they did that,
was that the reason for it? Were they trying to come up with a new biohazard, a new biological warfare?
Well, they could have been the reason, but they put in their paperwork it was to create cancer. It was to force cancer in laboratory animals so they could study cancer.
Okay.
That is very suspicious reasoning to me, to come up with something
because
deadly
there's already lots of agents out there that will cause spontaneous tumor and cancers in rats.
Exactly. I mean, you can put cadmium in it, and you can have kidney cancer in weeks, overloading with cadmium. There are lots of ways. So this was a suspicious reasoning for me, to my thinking. But it was done. Dr. Strecker called his brother, who was an attorney, and said, this is where it leads, follow it. So his brother checked the NSA, the War Department, and yes, that information had been sent to those departments, and it was allowed, it was given the green light to be used in experiments. So we found out the experiments were undesirables. They figured that in these particular committees that the undesirables were homosexuals.
Right.
Now, how could they administer this to homosexuals to see the consequences of this particular formulation?
Well, you just have to find homosexuals who are also intravenous drug users, and then spike the heroin or the speed or whatever they're shooting with some of this stuff, I guess.
No, you still can't get a good population that way. What they found was that in Los Angeles, New York City, Houston, and San Francisco, that 90% of the people who were being treated for hepatitis were homosexuals because they used a lot of drugs, damaged the liver. So hepatitis is a viral detoxification because there's so many chemicals in the liver, your bacteria from the liver can't clean it. So your body has to, the liver cells have to make solvents, which are again viruses. So it makes a self-cleansing substance. So all of your hepatitis are diseases trying to reverse a toxic condition where the liver is about to stop working completely. When you get to hepatitis, that means your liver is in terrible shape. No bacteria can help you.
So you're saying they contaminated the hepatitis vaccine?
B vaccine. With this AIDS virus. And they injected, that's why 10% of the population in those cities who got AIDS were not homosexuals, they were heterosexuals.
Oh, my God.
Then they went and put it in the smallpox vaccine. The U.S. government and the U.K. government donated hundreds of millions of dollars of smallpox vaccine to African countries. Then all of these do good meaning groups, go out and administer and going to save the world by giving all these vaccines to African children and everybody to save their lives, from smallpox. We're given this AIDS virus in the smallpox vaccine.
That's amazing.
125 million were donated. How many cases of AIDS were propped up in Africa within a year?
I don't know that number, but I remember it was half the population.
95 million.
Right.
75 million people died. Then what the U.S. government and the U.K. government did, went to those countries and said, listen, we have help for AIDS. We have chemotherapy, which is AZT.
Right.
We have chemotherapy that we can help your people with. We can help you stop this disease. We can treat your people. We'll bring the medical in, but you will owe us a lot of money. Now, they charged so much money that no way these countries could pay back. So when all was said and done, and all these people were dead, and very few people ever came through the AIDS without death, the U.S. government and U.K. government says, you owe us this much money. If you can't pay it, you owe us your country's resources.
Wow.
So they turned over the country's resources to be run by the World Bank. So we took over, the U.S. government and the U.K. government took over 27 African countries with that AIDS hoax and inundation.
That's
amazing. It's just like they use a different kind of warfare to usurp another country's resources. It's like war, like, the Spanish, the Roman.
But it's a stealth. They're waging a stealth war, because almost like a Trojan horse war, because they are being perceived as they're being invited in. They're being perceived as the saviors, but they're really the ones creating the problem so that they can come in and finish the job. Now,
absolutely. And if you read the book Confessions of a Financial Hitman, I think that's the title. It talks of this man who worked for the U.S. government and the CIA. They went in and loaned great amounts of money to foreign countries, foreign governments that could never pay it back, and then would take over their resources.
Wow.
That's the same thing they did with this AIDS incident.
Wuhan National Biosafety Lab is owned by GlaxoSmithKline, who merged with and owns a controlling 68% stakes in Pfizer, who manages the finances of BlackRock, who owns stakes in both Pfizer and AstraZeneca, and who has a partnership with Thomson Reuters, who supplies 80% of the news stories to the world's mainstream media. Thomson Reuters has created a branch within its editorial department to fact-check information about Pfizer COVID vaccines on social media, which may be why the Reuters mainstream media news neglected to inform you that the same World Bank that took over Africa's resources through a fake injected AIDS pandemic has now declared that this worldwide fake COVID pandemic will go on until March 31st, 2025, so they can do the same thing to your countries. They probably also forgot to tell you that COVID-19 test instruments, meaning diagnostic test kits, were already ordered back in 2018, 2 years before COVID-19 allegedly even existed and broke out in a wet market in China. Denmark sure pre-ordered a lot of them back in 2018. So did Uruguay, as well as the European Union, United States, Germany, Japan, and Singapore. They must have been psychic. That is why the pharmaceutical for-profit industry is so hell-bent on you never finding out that their Pasteur fraudulent germ theory was debunked by Béchamp 160 years ago. If you ever figure out that over 100 million Africans and homosexuals were murdered by the injection of poisonous foreign protein antigens in hepatitis B and smallpox vaccines, and then poisoned to death by toxic AZT mustard gas chemotherapy as the AIDS treatment, then you will figure out you are now being murdered and poisoned to death by this AIDS-creating RNA modification vaccine, and would never in a million years take this injection if you have even one functioning brain cell working inside your skull. They are preying on your ignorance to further their UN Agenda 21 depopulation goals. As CNN founder Ted Turner said in an interview with Audubon magazine, the present vast overpopulation, now far beyond the world carrying capacity, cannot be answered by future reductions in the birth rate due to contraception, sterilization, and abortion, but must be met in the present by the reduction of numbers presently existing. This must be done by whatever means necessary. An article in Live Science magazine entitled "Why an Australian COVID-19 Vaccine Caused False Positive HIV Tests" verifies what this film and Dr. Andrew Wakefield are discussing. You do not catch HIV. It is an autoimmune disease response to foreign poisonous antigen proteins injected into or created by your own cells in your body. Since your RNA modification now literally gives you COVID, it doesn't take a molecular biologist to figure out why you are testing positive for AIDS after your injection. Only unlike the Neshian Africans, who allowed do-gooder NGO groups to inject them with poisonous AIDS-causing smallpox vaccines, You are going to ignorantly let some ignorant vaccination center employee making $10 an hour modify your own cellular RNA to give yourself an autoimmune disease and depopulate yourself. Once your body no longer has the energy to keep fighting off these poisonous proteins your cells will continue to create. It will be blamed on the bogus mutated strain of COVID, a second deadly wave, and the ignorant will be none the wiser.
In fact, the testing could have been ramped up very quickly in a few countries that have almost avoided the epidemic entirely, like Taiwan, New Zealand, Australia. You know, they took their experience and actually prepared, and so they moved a lot faster. So we, we'll have to prepare for the next one. That, I'd say is will get attention this time.
If this sounds like conspiracy theory to you, it probably did to the Africans and homosexuals too, but that didn't stop warned, because the same people who killed and your country's resources. As you've probably already heard, COVID's vaccines must be kept in special suitcases and stored at minus 70 degrees Celsius or minus 94 degrees Fahrenheit, which is colder than Antarctica. Dr. Evenhouse points out that this is because this is not a vaccine. It is a transcription and transfection agent kept alive so it can infect your cells and transfer genetic material. This is genetic manipulation of humans on a massive scale. He says, shut it down. What you probably haven't heard is that this exact same technology was utilized in SIT projects to sterilize male mosquito populations who would then mate with females and sterilize them in order to wipe out entire mosquito populations. They too use transgenic technology, in which genes not already present in the mosquitoes are added and manipulated, and also symbiont-based technologies, in which another species, such as bacterium, is introduced to the host mosquitoes, just as the COVID mRNA vaccine is injecting into your arm to serve as instructions for your body to make foreign microbial protein poisons. The UK government website states it is unknown whether COVID-19 mRNA vaccine has an impact on fertility, as it is unknown whether the mRNA is excreted in human milk, but a risk to the newborns and infants cannot be excluded, so the vaccine should not be taken by the mother during breastfeeding. And since there are no limited amount of data from the use of the COVID-19 mRNA vaccine, and animal reproductive toxicity studies have not been completed, it is not recommended during pregnancy, and for women of childbearing age, pregnancy should be excluded before vaccination and should be advised to avoid pregnancy for at least 2 months after their second dose. We'll show you all of the next day miscarriages already happening in Part 3. Dr. Michael Yeadon, who was the Pfizer Vice President and Chief Scientist for Allergy and Respiratory, claims that the COVID vaccine is female sterilization because it contains a spike protein called syncytin-1, vital for the formation of human placenta in women. If the vaccine works so that we form an immune response against that spike protein, we are training the female body to attack syncytin, which could lead to infertility in women of an unspecified duration. Dr. Yeadon also warns that the mRNA vaccines from at least Pfizer contain PEG, and that 70% of people develop antibodies against that substance, but that means 30% of people, or 2.3 billion people out of the 7.8 billion people they want vaccinated, can develop allergic, potentially fatal reactions to the vaccination. as we'll show you in Part 3, is indeed happening. Sir John Irving Bell is a Canadian immunologist and geneticist, former president of the Academy of Medical Sciences, holds the Regius Chair of Medicine at the University of Oxford, is chairman of the Office for Strategic Coordination of Health, and was selected to the Vaccine Task Force around July 2020.
But then don't forget, these vaccines are unlikely to completely sterilize a population. They're very likely to have an effect which works in a percentage, say 60 or 70%.
These vaccines are unlikely to completely sterilize a population. They're very likely to have an effect which works in a percentage, say 60 or 70%.
We'll have to look quite carefully, and the regulators will have to look quite carefully to make sure that it's done what we need it to do before it gets approved.
I'm sure he just meant herd immunity. Still, these are strange choices of biotech companies, some of whom have never made vaccines before now. And that is because, as we've been pointing out in this film, this is not a vaccine.
Since the human genome was sequenced, scientists have had the instructions for the structure and function of every component of every cell in the body at their disposal. Occasionally, within these instructions, errors or changes to gene sequences can arise which may cause disease. But investigators have lacked a practical and precise way to edit gene sequences to treat and potentially cure disease. That is, until now. CRISPR is a precise genome editing tool which enables scientists to work inside cells and make specific changes to genes. It is a two-part system comprising a single guide RNA which directs the Cas9 nuclease to cause a double-stranded break in the matching DNA sequence. When Cas9 cuts the DNA, it triggers the cell's natural repair enzymes to fix these breaks. It's during this process that the target gene can be modified by adding to, disrupting, or changing its genetic information. Or instead of rewriting the gene sequence itself, different types of CRISPR can be used upstream to switch genes on or off. By simply altering the composition of the guide RNA, different precise locations within the genome can be targeted. AstraZeneca is employing CRISPR within its drug discovery platform to help speed and refine our understanding of disease. By changing the activity of a gene in a biological pathway and examining the impact of this change, we will discover novel therapeutic targets. Precise control over the genome enables us to accurately model human disease in cell lines in weeks rather than months, and these models are used to screen compounds to find new, safer medicines. Ultimately, CRISPR will help us to reach parts of the genome that traditional medicines cannot, and may enable us to alter the genetic code to correct genetic errors and cure disease. Together with our in-house CRISPR team and with our world-renowned academic partners, AstraZeneca is pioneering technology to genetically edit the way to better treatments for patients.
At Moderna, we believe messenger RNA represents an unprecedented opportunity to develop medicines for patients, one that could have a dramatic impact on the course of human health and disease. In order to understand why we believe that, we have to pull back and ask a very fundamental question, which is, what is life and how might messenger RNA impact it? Now, life is really just the flow of information in a biological system. The ebbs and flows of that information dictate health and disease, and that's true in every cell in our body, throughout our bodies, and throughout all forms of life. In order to explore that more deeply, we must follow the flow of information in cells. And in cells, information is stored in the DNA. The DNA is a double-stranded helix of tightly wound genetic information that is itself wound around a set of proteins called histones that are themselves then tightly wound around each other into chromosomes. It's analogous to those old tape drives in IBM computers, where in order to access that information, what cells have to do is they have to go find that right tape drive, unwind it, and start to make a working copy. That process of unwinding and making a working copy is called transcription, where a series of proteins will search that DNA, unwind it a bit, bind to the DNA, and start a process of making a pre-messenger RNA molecule. That pre-messenger RNA molecule, when done, will go off and be spliced by a whole different group of proteins called the spliceosome that will edit out certain pieces, leading to a messenger RNA. That messenger RNA is the first fully intact copy, working copy of the information of life, that then leaves the nucleus and goes and does all of the work of life. It does that by seeking out ribosomes in the cytosol. These ribosomes translate the messenger RNA into all of the proteins of life, including secreted proteins, transmembrane proteins, mitochondrial proteins, and even proteins that go back into the nucleus and do all the work of storing that information or selecting information to be unwound to make more messenger RNA. So messenger RNA really is the central molecule in all of biology's processes. We call it the software of life. Now, given that power, it's reasonable to ask whether others have pursued it as a therapeutic approach. And in fact, many of the more exciting technology platforms in biotechnology today are. One example is siRNA. siRNA specifically binds to and degrades messenger RNAs inside of cells. It selects a specific messenger RNA relative to others, thereby changing the flow of information. Another example is gene therapy. In gene therapy, DNA is introduced from the outside and translocates into the nucleus of cells, where either episomal DNA or DNA that is inserted into the genome of the host will go through those same processes of transcription into pre-mRNAs and splicing into final mRNAs that then get exported out of the cell. In many senses, gene therapy is an indirect way to increase or add a specific type of messenger RNA to cells from the outside. So all of these approaches are about modifying the types or amounts of messenger RNA inside of cells so that you can have a phenotypic effect in a disease. Our approach has been more direct. Can we put messenger RNA directly into cells to create proteins, both endogenous proteins and foreign proteins? And if we could, we believe that messenger RNA could be used to make the full set of proteins in life.
On September 14th, 2020, the UK government's Medicine and Healthcare Products Agency, or MHRA, put out a shocking contract bid request on TED tenders, the supplement to the official journal of the EU, stating the MHRA urgently seeks an artificial intelligence AI software tool to process the expected high volume of COVID-19 vaccine adverse reactions, or ADRs, and ensure that no details from the ADR's reaction text are missed. It went on to say, for reasons of extreme urgency related to the release of a COVID-19 vaccine, the MHRA have accelerated the sourcing and implementation of a vaccine-specific artificial intelligence tracking tool, strictly necessary. It is not possible to retrofit the MHRA's legacy systems to handle the volume of ADRs that will be generated by the COVID-19 vaccine. Notice that they say will be generated, not might be. Therefore, if the MHRA does not implement the AI tool, it will be unable to process these adverse reactions effectively. This will hinder its ability to rapidly identify any potential safety issues with the COVID-19 vaccine and represents a, quote, direct threat to patient life and public health. Meaning when the massive amounts of people they are expecting to start getting sick and dying from this jab, they won't even know just how many people that is and how much damage was actually done until it's too late. On December 29th, the UK NHS website published Managing Anaphylaxis in the COVID-19 Vaccination Setting, telling vaccine administrators to watch for sudden onset and rapid progression of symptoms life-threatening airway and or breathing and or circulation problems, skin and or mucosal changes, flushing, urticaria, angioedema, and even recommended that an anaphylaxis pack should be immediately available in each location where the vaccines are being given and not stored in a locked cupboard or trolley. Lastly, that the new management options for anaphylaxis are intramuscular adrenaline and oxygen, and that the usual antihistamines and steroids are no longer recommended for immediate management of anaphylaxis in vaccination settings. Of course, Charles Richet won a Nobel Prize way back in 1913 for his research and discoveries on the actual cause of anaphylaxis, that when a non-self toxin, toxalbumin or foreign protein, is injected into the bloodstream, and then that same toxin or protein is injected again later, the body has been rendered hypersensitive to that poison or foreign protein instead of being protected. This is the opposite of what the theory of inoculation or vaccination immunization bogusly claims. But here's the part you need to know. Although the phenomenon of anaphylaxis occurs after every injection of foreign protein, there is a 3 or 4 week incubation period before the subject is hypersensitive to the second injection, meaning if you inject that same protein or toxin again within 3 weeks, the body might still be able to handle it. Again, instead of applying to only toxins and toxalbumins, it holds good for all proteins, whether toxic at first injection or not. The anaphylactic state never passes. Once a subject has been anaphylactized and consequently modified in his chemical constitution, then the subject can never go back to his former state. Return to normal is not possible. Subjects have been known who, even after 4 years from the date of the first foreign protein injection, were still sensitive to the unleashing reaction. It is an extraordinary phenomenon that so insignificant a quantity of poison can modify the organism to the extent that the succeeding days down long years cannot eradicate this indelible modification. Meaning they are full of shit when they tell you that trace amounts of mercury and other poisonous adjuvants or fetal stem cells in vaccines are so small that they are insignificant. Bullshit. Anaphylactic symptoms also vary to a great extent, although differences are marked rather according to the nature of the recipient's biochemistry than according to the nature of the poison or protein used. That is why some people have horrible adverse reactions while others have none or only mild symptoms. A subject that had a previous injection is far more sensitive than the new subject, which is why people who took flu shots with some of the same toxic adjuvants are having more terrible adverse reactions to the COVID vaccine than those who didn't. And this can't be stressed enough. A 3 or 4 week period must elapse before the anaphylactic state results. This is the period of incubation. Why is that so important? Because the UK Health Service just pushed back the interval for delivering the second Pfizer coronavirus vaccine to a duration Pfizer says is untested. The NHS wrote a letter to hospitals saying those who are scheduled to receive their second dose after January 4th should be rescheduled from 3 weeks' time to the 12th. The NHS said the move would protect the greatest number of at-risk people in the shortest period and have the greatest impact on mortality. That is bullshit. The medical industry has known since 1903 that 3 weeks is the incubation period needed for developing anaphylaxis hypersensitivity. It's going to have a great impact on mortality, all right. It's going to murder more people. In fact, EpiPens are used to treat emergency anaphylaxis, and one of the first things Joe Biden did in office was to reverse Trump's order to lower the prices of EpiPens, right before the second scheduled round of COVID's vaccines causes millions of major anaphylactic reactions. Now, why might that be, Joe? What else aren't we being told about these permanent Frankenstein genetic modification injections? Part 3. Severe adverse reactions and death. Last year, the WHO, CDC, and national health agencies worldwide told us the average age of death from the alleged COVID virus was 82 years old, which just happens to be the average life expectancy for all humans, and that 94% of those deaths were sick elderly people already dying of 2.6 other terminal illnesses. So the world was locked down and economies shattered to protect our vulnerable and elderly. This year, Ted Turner's CNN is telling us don't be alarmed if elderly die after receiving the COVID's vaccine, that we should not be unnecessarily alarmed if there are reports, once we start vaccinating, of someone or multiple people dying within a day or two of their vaccination who are residents of a long-term care facility. Well, which is it? Are we saving them or murdering them? Let's ask the 24 dead in a New York nursing home, or the 26 dead in Gibraltar, 33 dead in Norway, 5 dead in Denmark, 55 dead reported on VAERS in just 2 weeks. Keep in mind that less than 1% of adverse reactions and deaths are ever even reported on VAERS. As of 3 weeks ago, VAERS had 211 reported deaths. And since only 1% are even reported to VAERS, it's more likely 21,000 real deaths and 42,000 reported side effects, more likely 4.2 million side effects out of the 82.5 million shots already given so far. This woman's father-in-law died just 3 days after his first dose of the Pfizer vaccine. 6 died in the Pfizer vaccine trial. Kara's grandmother took the vaccine December 28th and died January 1st. She was doing just fine before the vaccine. 1 died at a nursing home 45 minutes after the shot. An Ohio woman's mother died a few days after, and in a Dover Riverside nursing home, 4 died in 1 night, which is unheard of. Lori's 85-year-old father-in-law died 6 days after the jab. 94-year-old mother-in-law dead 4 hours after an adverse reaction. Great-grandfather dead 2 weeks after the shot. Seavey's 97-year-old aunt died within 48 hours after the shot. 88-year-old father-in-law, pressured to take the jab, was fit as a fiddle, had 2 strokes, and died. The family has concluded he was murdered by the vaccine. In the nursing home in Auburn, New York, they had 0 COVID deaths up until December 29th, and then 24 deaths within just 7 days after giving out the vaccine.
I'm here to speak from the angle of a medical expert, from a CNA perspective, from a person who works in the medical field. Okay, and what I'm going to talk about, it is something I'm going to be honest with you. It is not being spoken about enough. There are some that are beginning to speak about it, but we need to speak about this. This is a serious issue. In 2020, the whole entire year, we did not have a single death. Did you hear what I said? A single death from any of our residents who had COVID-19. As a matter of fact, we only had about 5 people, how many I said? 5 people at the most who was infected with COVID-19. 0 death for the entire year of 2020. Just about 5 cases at the most. All of them survived. December 2020, right around the time of the 22nd and so on, I can get you the exact date if you want that, the vaccine was administered to our patients and also to some of our staff members. Get this, friends. We are in January 18, 2021, 2 weeks after these people received the vaccine, particularly the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. I am seeing this pattern of not just side effects, to the point where we had people who were once walking who are no longer walking. People who were once talking who could no longer talk. People who were once able to think could no longer think properly. Delirium, confused. The expert says that the vaccine do not have the COVID-19 in it. I understand. Okay. It's supposed to be a stimulus, right? A stimulus that's supposed to help your immune system to fight against the virus if you were to confront it. That's the purpose of this vaccine, right? Our residents are dying after they have taken this vaccine. And what troubles me, this is not even being spoken about. What bothers my heart is that it's almost like, don't talk about this. Just keep quiet. You go to the year of 2020, 0 death, and I can speak the same for many, many nursing homes. 0 death. You go to the whole entire year. Not a single person passed away. We are in 2021. We are in the middle of the month. Where I work right now, over 14 patients have already died. They are dropping like flies.
But hang on. The CDC data says the alleged COVID survival rate for people over age 69 is over 99%, meaning less than 1 in 100 people die. In order to have 14 die in his nursing home, he would have to have at least 1,400 residents there, despite the average size nursing home being 120 beds and the largest being 744 beds, with all 1,400 of them allegedly sick and infected. Yet he said only 5 were sick and none died the entire year of 2020. And it's not just the elderly who are dying. A resident COVID vaccination clinic worker died within 12 hours of her shot. Her co-worker is being directed not to report to VAERS by her corporate management. Now, why might that be? Christy lost a nurse friend in Roanoke, Virginia, who got the shot, then called Christy to say she fainted afterwards, went to the hospital, and died. Diane's friend's sister's 34-week-old baby passed away 48 hours after the shot. 2 pregnant women got these poisonous injections to protect their babies. Both have miscarried after the first dose. It would appear Dr. Yeadon was not joking around. A Connecticut medical worker's friend died less than 8 hours after her COVID's vaccination. An ER nurse proudly rolled up her sleeve December 20th and died December 26th with a heart issue. An Israeli man died of a heart attack hours after his COVID's vaccine. Pro-vaccine doctor Gregory Michael died of a hemorrhage stroke in a matter of minutes, just a few weeks after his vaccine. Cecilia's cousin's daughter-in-law got the shot because she worked at the hospital, began having trouble breathing, and died less than a week later, leaving behind 3 children and a husband. A 40-year-old man in great shape died 2 days after getting the vaccine. His lifelong friend maintains, "You are completely out of your mind if you let them stick you." I have dozens upon dozens of others from just a few hours of my own research, and this film isn't long enough or intended to chronicle all of these events, only to alert you to the fact, again, that if you put your hand in the fire, you will get burned. You can get burned if you want to. That's perfectly okay. The world could definitely use more parking spaces, just so long as you know what's coming to you. A recent video has surfaced from a FedEx warehouse employee showing hundreds of stacked pallets full of tens of thousands of cadaver body bags being shipped out nonstop. Coincidence? Mr. Gates certainly didn't seem to think so. Others were lucky enough to get off with mild anaphylactic symptoms like severe rashes and partial paralysis or numbness. One nurse giving the COVID shots at Mercy Hospital said people are passing out, eyes swelling shut, full body rashes and numbness in the arms, hives, aching joints, skin and palms of hands beginning to peel and sheet off. Dr. Cynthia Foster tells us about a physician's assistant at a New York hospital who took the jab and was given Steven Johnson syndrome. It makes all the skin on your body peel off and makes you go blind. She looks like a burn victim and is now in the burn unit with her eyes taped shut, and they don't know if she will survive. If she does, she will likely be blind at least in one eye, if not both, and have to go through numerous skin graft surgeries and be scarred all over her body for life.
So long story short, I collapsed. I had two seizures, and I blacked out. I was throwing up. My heart rate was 194, and I was paralyzed. I felt like I was paralyzed. Like, my hands were stuck like this. I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't do anything for myself. And I couldn't breathe. My face was tingling all right here. My arms were tingling, and everything was tingling. And then I got 2 EpiPens on the side of my leg, and I think that's as much as I can really fit into this video. But if you want to learn more, you can.
It would take 3 hours of film just to show all of the hundreds of testimonials that I have found in just a few hours of research. And you are welcome to pause this film on some of these and read them. I can't possibly fit them all in. But ask yourself this. The world total death rate for 2020 was exactly the same as it was in the previous 5 years, and even less in most cases. Yet the media and governments have told us there is some brand new deadly disease killing millions, which should mean the mortality rate should be millions higher than the previous years, not less, while simultaneously telling us that the seasonal flu, which kills millions worldwide each year, has miraculously disappeared completely for the first time in history. This new alleged virus has never been isolated or proven to either exist or cause illness, has the exact same 99.97% survival rate as the seasonal flu, is 80% asymptomatic, meaning you aren't sick, you feel fine and have no symptoms, and in the 20% of people who are told they do have this alleged virus through a PCR test that admittedly can't do any such thing as detect a virus, that 90% of the people who do die are 82 years old and already dying of 2.6 other terminal illnesses, usually respiratory disease and cancer. The symptoms of this alleged virus are a dry cough, fever, headache, and shortness of breath. Coincidentally, the exact same symptoms as the seasonal flu. Flu vaccines have been around for decades and have not stopped the flu, We still have it every year like clockwork, except last year and this year, of course. Are you so irrational and frightened by blatant media propaganda, so ignorant, blind, clueless, uninformed, or dare I say stupid, that in order to get on an airplane or be able to go back to bars and restaurants again, that you are willing to inject yourself and genetically modify your RNA to give yourself AIDS, Bell's palsy, paralysis, anaphylactic shock, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, heart attack, Guillain-Barré syndrome, acute encephalomyelitis, transverse myelitis, encephalitis, stroke, narcolepsy, cataplexy, myocarditis, pericarditis, permanent autoimmune disease, miscarriage, infertility, allergic reactions, thrombocytopenia, disseminated intravascular coagulation, venous thromboembolism, arthritis and joint pain, Kawasaki disease, multi-system inflammatory disease, and possibly death? Well, are you? Darwin has no shortage of awards for you, if so. Despite less than 1% of people reporting hundreds of thousands of COVID's vaccine adverse reactions already on VAERS and doubling weekly, the Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Reuters-controlled media is saying nonsense like 29 COVID-19 vaccine recipients had serious allergic reactions, or with nearly 5 million Americans vaccinated, just 29 have had confirmed allergic reactions. If your reality comes from the television, you have just seen that you are not living in reality. Of course, we have people like Stanley Johnson, author of Life Without Birth, who wrote, "If the number of new births cannot be reduced, the number of deaths each year must increase until the next growth of the world's population is cut down to a more manageable number. This business of an increase in the death rate is not, of course, attractive. The recipes, meaning man-made, include thermonuclear war, global famine, plague, meaning injected virus pandemic, and a newly discovered horror called eco-catastrophe, or climate change." You might know his son, Boris Johnson, the current UK Tory Prime Minister, whose own website still boasts a self-penned October 2007 article called Global Population Control, about which he told The Telegraph that same month the world's population is now 6.7 billion, roughly double what it was when I was born. If I live to be in my mid-80s, then it will have trebled. I simply cannot understand why no one discusses this impending calamity, and why no statesmen have the guts to treat the issue with the seriousness it deserves. Now, of course, the same statesman who wants depopulation suddenly wants everyone to roll up their sleeve and take a jab to save lives, to stop as much of the plague depopulation as possible. What a guy, but Daddy wouldn't approve. More curious is this alleged amendment to a Treasury memorandum circulated to ministers in October 2019, alleging to have been obtained through the UK Freedom of Information Act. While there are and should be doubts as to whether or not this document is legitimate, and I am definitely suspicious that it might be photoshopped, as only an idiot would admit treason and then declassify it to a member of the public, so let's just assume it's probably fake. The point is, whoever wrote it or doctored it has summed up beautifully what is really going on right now under the guise of this fake pandemic. Damage to the wider economy is only achievable by imposing continuing measures to prevent trading amongst the commerce and service industries as a whole, regardless of the size of organization. It is likely that strike action and more likely general public disorder will occur, which the governments would struggle to crack down on without the necessary financial sweeteners, including generous benefit packages as proposed in Section 3A and 4 of the Memorandum Emergency Financial Infrastructure. Any such disorder will be discouraged by a public health campaign that will bring on board a mixture of health information, analysis, and data presented by government and independent institutions. All ministers will be complicit in the publication of the health directives using public and private media organizations. The names of the considered independent institutions are outlined in Section 11B and 11C of the memorandum. The proposed media organizations are outlined in Section 11E.
Okay, let's end with this one, and that is the Influenza Preparedness Stakeholder Conference on the centenary of the 1918 pandemic, and this took place in January 2019. It was run by Chatham House, which is the Royal Institute for International Affairs, and there were all kinds of people at this. So I'm going to show a little bit of video here of Mark van Ranst, who's was the Belgian flu commissioner, and he was talking about the importance of the use of the media in pushing forward a narrative when it comes to this kind of public health issue. And remember, this was over a year before we started to see exactly the things he was talking about happening in real life, so to speak. So have a listen to this.
I was asked to tell you about my experiences being the crisis manager, the flu commissioner for Belgium, and highlighting the communication aspects there. And then you have one opportunity to do it right. And day one is so important. In day one, you start your communication with the press, with the people, and you have to do it right. I mean, you have to go for one voice, one message. In Belgium, they chose to appoint a non-politician to do that. And I have no party affiliations, and that makes things a little bit, at that time at least, a little bit easier, because you're not attacked politically, majority, minority. That doesn't come into play, and that was a huge advantage. The second advantage is that you can play in Brussels the complete naive guy, and get a lot more done than you would otherwise be able to do. You have to be omnipresent that first day or the first days, so that you attract the media attention. You make an agreement with them that you will tell them all, and if they call, you will pick up the phone. When you do that, then you can profit from these early days to get complete carpet coverage of the field, and they're not going to search for alternative voices there. And if you do that, that makes things a lot easier. And then you have to say, okay, well, we will have H1N1 deaths. Of course, that would be unavoidable. I used there Sir Donaldson's quote, where he said that in UK, by the peak of the epidemic, 40 people would die per day at the end of the summer. So 62 at that time million people in UK, 40 deaths a day. I worked it out for Belgium. That would be 7 deaths a day at the peak of the epidemic. I used that in the media. 7 Belgian flu deaths per day at the peak of the epidemic would be realistic. That is true in every year, even interpandemically. That is very, very conservative. However, talking about fatalities is important, because when you say that, people say, wow, what do you mean? People die because of influenza? That is true in every year, even interpandemically. That is very, very conservative. However, talking about fatalities is important, because when you say that, people say, wow, what do you mean? People die because of influenza? And that was a necessary step to take. And then, of course, a couple of days later, you had the first H1N1 death in the country, and the scene was set and it was already talked about.
Sound familiar? Now you know why the seasonal flu has disappeared the exact same year this new alleged virus comes on the scene. Mark just told you, this isn't the first time they've done this scam. So what can we do about all of this? Part 4, the solution, a convenient truth. For starters, if you truly believe the world is overpopulated, by all means, Voluntarily roll up your sleeve and take one for the team and the planet. Your body, your choice. But stop gaslighting those who understand that poison is not the cure for poison. Their body, their choice. They are anti-vaxxers for the same reason people don't pet angry rattlesnakes. Stop supporting forced medical tyranny. If you want to stop humans being hooked up to the cloud like livestock, don't let them shove nanodust computers into your brain barrier with a nasal swab, and don't download their bullshit contact tracer apps. Educate yourself. The UN Agenda 21 depopulation agenda cannot be successfully carried out once the people of the world are no longer ignorant of these truths. Germ theory is still a theory and not a fact after 230 years because viruses have never to this day been isolated, proven to exist, or proven to be the cause of any illness. All of the major diseases have been attributed to a combination of acidic blood pH due to mental stress releasing fight-or-flight hormones and a deficiency in cellular tissue salts and vitamins. Viruses are nothing more than exosomes and pleomorphic bacterial phages, janitors made inside of your own body, by your own body, to clean out all toxins and damaged tissue resulting from all non-self poisons, proteins, and genetic material that enter into your body. You do not catch sickness or disease. You create it internally to help return you back to a balanced state of health and well-being. Your ignorant Dark Age belief in germ theory propagates $1 trillion a year medical drug cartel industry and depopulation agendas for governments and eugenicists. PCR tests do not and cannot detect anything more than minuscule amounts of genetic nucleotide fragments that a computer has been told to search for. These are called primer sequences and are set to detect the same nucleotide sequences found in goats, fruits, motor oil, river water, dog pee, kiwis, pineapple, Coca-Cola, apple juice, and even blank swab tests right out of the packaging. PCR tests only prove that they found a minuscule partial fragment of whatever genetic primer material they were looking for. Remember, there are only 4 nucleobases that make up the nucleotide sequences and genomes of all life on Earth. Bacterial genome sequences are hundreds of thousands long, and human sequences can be 145 million long, not 18 to 20. How many times out of hundreds of thousands to hundreds of millions do you think A, T, C, and G line up in at least one of these 18 in a row sequences? It does not prove that whatever genetic material they were looking for belongs exclusively to some hypothetical, never isolated virus, or even that that specific genetic material is the cause of any disease or illness. It's like finding a microscopic piece of lint in someone's pant pocket and saying that it proves they own a textile factory in India. And now the World Health Organization has just admitted that labs were running PCR doubling cycles at 40 times, making genetic material 65 million times amplified, resulting in nearly, quote, any genetic particle being declared a positive case. Injecting poisons and foreign protein into your body does not make you immune to more foreign poisons and proteins. It sets you up for anaphylaxis. They will absolutely get away with this unless you have the wisdom to educate yourself and the courage to both speak out to others about what you learn and to non-comply with medical tyranny. Lastly, virology is a scam. We will end this film with Dr. Tom Cowan explaining exactly how this con has been perpetrated, so you won't fall victim to it ever again.
What I've discovered is that if science is going to be used as a weapon against us, it's actually nice if we know a little bit about science so that we can't be fooled as easily. And lately, a lot of people have been sending me, once again, studies published in the peer-reviewed medical literature, some of them from Nature, some of them from New England Journal, some of them from Lancet, a variety of them, saying, here's a paper that shows proper isolation, characterization of the genome, and then a few even having proved Koch's postulates. Personally, I've counted 31 such papers that have been sent to me or I've come across, although I wouldn't hold me to that number because I may have double counted some or missed some. And then I heard that somebody was saying that there's 125, I think it was the number that they used, different laboratories or different examples of the isolation of the virus. So let's go over that one more time, because isolation means the separation of one thing from everything else. That's the common dictionary term. Which in everything, so a virus is a thing, not like a thought or an emotion or a feeling, it's a thing. Everything can be separated from everything that's not the same thing as itself. And once it's separated, it can be counted. And the example that I use is you take coffee and you grind it up, and that's not, if you're looking to see whether caffeine is the cause of, say, high blood pressure, the ground coffee bean is not pure isolated caffeine. So then you filter it like you make coffee and you get rid of the grounds, and now you have a brew of coffee. And that's also not pure isolated caffeine because there are many other compounds in there. And so any experiment done with coffee to see whether it's the caffeine is obviously flawed and invalid. So then you do the next step, which is to take out, to purify the caffeine. You can do that with a centrifuge. There's other laboratory techniques that can do that and have been done since the 30s. So you can make sure that you have simply and only chemical caffeine. You can then extract that. You can send it to another lab to verify the steps that you took. And they say, yes, this is only caffeine. Then you expose an animal to that. And if it causes high blood pressure and you do appropriate controls, then you know with reasonable certainty that the isolated caffeine, which you have now proven to exist, is actually the cause of the high blood pressure. Now, I would still contend after 1 year and after reading these 31 studies and talking to literally hundreds of people, either in person or through email, that there is not one study using that same methodology that has shown the existence of a coronavirus, including the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Not one. So the question is, what are all these virologists doing? Because the other thing about the caffeine example is most of us, in fact, I think all of us would agree that if you made coffee, in other words, ground the coffee beans, filtered it, and then mixed that in a vat of tea and yerba mate and chocolate and a bunch of other caffeine-containing chemicals or substances, you would then, from then on, never be able to know that the caffeine that you're looking for came from the coffee beans, because all these other substances have the same exact chemical in them, and so the whole experiment becomes flawed and invalid. So what do the virologists do? What's the basis of all these papers? So you take at best, you take the respiratory secretions, or I like to say the snot, from somebody who has this disease. Now, there's obviously a first problem is how do you define the disease? But let's forget about that for a minute and say, let's just assume there is something called COVID-19, which is a specific disease entity. So you take a person or 10 people or 500 people, and then you do the same thing with the coffee. You grind it up, and that just helps you extract things better. And then you put it through a filter paper, and then you have unpurified supernatant, it's called, which is liquid stuff with a whole lot of genetic material and possibly viruses because the mesh or size of the pores caught the cells and the bacteria and the fungus and all the other things. So you get rid of that part. But that's obviously not isolated or purified. Now, interesting, what they do then is they stop the purification process then, and then they inoculate that unpurified, unisolated mess onto usually vero cells, which is basically monkey kidney tissue. Now, the problem there is that's exactly equivalent to putting the coffee into a vat with chocolate and tea, because it turns out that there is only one kind of DNA or RNA. I mean, there's many different varieties, but it's all made of the same thing. And so the monkey kidney tissue has exactly the kind of genetic material as does this so-called virus. Now, again, as I've said over and over again, the inoculation of this unpurified stuff doesn't actually break down the kidney tissue. So they have to help it by starving, which is called minimal nutrient medium. And then they poison it by nephrotoxic, in other words, kidney toxic antibiotics like gentamicin and amphotericin. So this then causes the disintegration or so-called lysis or breakdown of the kidney tissue into numerous particles and vesicles and essentially debris. Now, at that point, you have no idea where any of this genetic material came from. They then do PCR tests, which have never been standardized against having found a virus in the first place. So they have no idea whether any of these segments are unique to anything because they've never isolated and pulled out the genome in the first place. And so you could ask, so where do they get the genome? They get the genome because they take some of these segments, they find that they attach to certain pieces in this brew, and then they put those segments into a computer, and it makes what they call an in silico genome. In silico is a fancy word for theoretical, which is essentially a synonym for the word imaginary, which is essentially a synonym for the word make-believe. So, and they standardize this in silico genome against the first SARS virus, which was made in exactly the same way with an in silico, i.e. imaginary genome of an imaginary virus. So then they say, this is now what the new definition of isolation means. We find these pieces of genetic material in this brew that contains, first of all, unpurified snot, and then broken down tissue that contains the exact same kind of sequences and genetic material as does the virus, because it's never been proven that there's anything unique about any of the sequences. In fact, as I pointed out, when a friend did a BLAST search, which is a search of the essentially genetic database, he found that the one of the primer sequences called the spike protein, it matches 93 human sequences and 91 sequences from other microbes and fungus and other organisms. So there's nothing unique about this. They're simply testing for pieces of genetic material, having no idea the origin of this genetic material. So As far as I know, and I know this, I think, as well as anybody could know it, there is not one study out there, there has never been with this virus or many other viruses, that has properly isolated the virus, properly sequenced the virus, and if you can't properly isolate it, you cannot say that a sequence of it comes only from that virus. And if you've never isolated it, just like you could never say that it's only the caffeine that causes high blood pressure unless and until you've isolated the caffeine, you can never prove that the virus is the cause of this disease. Isolation is the key, and no matter how many people say they've isolated, no matter how many people criticize me and us for saying it, I still contend that there is simply no evidence that this kind of isolation has ever happened with this or with many other of the viruses that we are told cause disease. And again, I hope that that's very clear and everybody really understands this, because to me, that right there is the key to the kingdom.